you are on your way to Iron Mountain Observatory to find out why and went silent after receiving a signal from a missing probe. This celestial mystery must be evaluated from every perspective.
Now I lay me down to sleep.
There appear to be pages from a Bible covering the walls.
Pray the Lord my soul to keep.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
If I should die before I wake,
Get out of my head! Did you hear that?
I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Amen.
Book of Revelations talks about the end of times. Do you think that's what's happening now?
Amen.
It's starting.
What is it you want?
To fulfill prophecy.
What prophecy?
On earth.
The signal coming through the headphones. Everybody is in danger.
Join us.
Do you hear it, Gabriel? All roads have led to this moment. Let the signal transmit.
Amen.
Welcome to this station of decapitation without your head. I'm Nasty Neil, and I'm joined by Douglas Schulze, writer and director of Thorns. It's very cool to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate you coming on. And I think horror folks know about Thorns already, but for those who don't, can you give them an idea of what Thorns is?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, the gestation for the idea or the impetus, really began, years ago with my love for 80s era monster movies. And, I always said to myself, one year I wanted to kind of pay homage to that era, movies like The Thing, Hellraiser and of that sort. So I set out to make a retro monster movie with a modern day setting, and that became Thorns, so it's been getting some good traction, and we're really pleased about that.
It definitely feels like a movie from that era, something like we would have rented on VHS or, and you mentioned The Thing, like some Event Horizon kind of feeling there, and a lot of stuff from that era, a lot of the cool horror stuff that we all like.
You got it. Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
No, for sure. And it's set in a remote Michigan, remote observatory, and there's a mysterious radio signal from deep space, and we have this former priest who's now working for NASA, who goes to investigate this mysterious radio signal from deep space, and sort of evolves into a traditional a monster movie, but it melds a lot of religious and science fiction themes. So we try and throw some some interesting stuff in there too.
Yeah, I mean, people have even seen the poster art. You can kind of see like the crown of thorns on the monster character, and there's a nun. There's a lot of is there any the religious stuff in the movie? Does that get any like backlash?
Well, I always think, I mean, years ago, right? Films that used to tackle, religious horror used to get a lot more backlash. I think today society's a bit more accepting, of that, even though we are going through an era where, you got to kind of watch, I guess, what you're exploring in some veins. But, we haven't encountered, much by way of, the Catholic Church hasn't sent any, priest assassins after us yet.
Not yet.
But not yet. We'll see.
Yeah. You did mention briefly there about, watching what you say on some level, because I've seen stuff. Unfortunately, I don't know if you'll ever be on Tubi or anything, but people are starting to say like Tubi's starting to have people censor their films, which is unfortunate.
Really?
That's been like the favorite for independent filmmakers for the last few years.
Yeah, that'll be curious to see where that goes. So, what's interesting is, I mean, for me, growing up, independent cinema always represented a bit of a safe haven, for filmmakers, and a place where you could explore, the outrageousness, whether it's Wes Craven's Last House on the Left. I remember that was pretty rough when it came out, and other films like that. So it's a bit concerning to hear that, now that's under scrutiny.
So, over the years that you've been making independent horror movies, how has it? Is it better or is it worse to get your movies out there? Because there are more platforms, and like Thorns has select theater release, and you're expanding next week. You actually do see independent horror films get a release at times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, how has that changed?
Well, I think from an economic standpoint, every filmmaker would agree with me. The death of physical disc, or the near death of it, right? We used to be able to make an independent film, and there was almost a certainty, a majority of your income would be derived back from physical disc sales to like Redbox. If you did a deal to Redbox, there was a good chance you'd make like 40% of your budget back. But that's all gone now. And streaming is pretty precarious, I mean, you could put a new release on a streaming platform and you start getting checks, but they're only like $75 checks, and you're going, hey, I put a couple $100,000 into this movie. What's going on? And so it's getting tougher and I hope it all shakes out somehow. But the most ironic thing of all is theaters seem to be returning for independent filmmakers, specifically the multiplexes. And, we've decided to completely bypass streaming for now. And so you're not going to see Thorns for the next good part of the year anywhere on streaming platforms. We are just in theaters, and it's kind of working for us.
I like that. I mean, I'm someone who goes to the theater every week, and I think the success of Terrifier 2 like helped a lot of independent horror people, because it was going to play like 1 day or 3 days, and then it just kept going, and then we got to see like a lot of stuff get a chance after that, because it's like, oh, this is, besides the big blockbuster movie, these are the kind of movies that people will come out and see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, you mentioned Terrifier 2, and boy, there's a lot that's owed to that film, because it's sort of invigorated gore cinema, right? And it helped normalize it a little, to where I think some people that used to shy away from that type or part of the genre are now kind of a bit more welcoming. So can't wait for
it was a funny experience. My friend Annabelle and I went to see Terrifier 2 at the AMC, and they played it in the IMAX theater, and I don't think it was actually an IMAX, but they played it in that theater. And it was like a big group of people, and I was like, I wonder what they think they're about to watch. Like they're
Yeah.
thinking they're going to go see the next Conjuring or something, and it's a much different film.
Yeah, right. Yeah, or is this Oppenheimer,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it makes me happy that because I'm a big horror fan. I like movies in general, but I'm a big horror fan. So.
Well, sure, yeah, and your platform's certainly a great beacon for independent filmmakers like myself. So bravo to you for launching and in sticking with it. It's awesome.
Thank you. So, John Bennett, who you've worked with previously on your other movies, and a lot of those, what made him write for Gabriel? Because people haven't seen it yet. It's a very small cast, and
Yeah.
he's the guy who really carries most of the dialogue in the film. So it has to be
Yeah.
like a guy.
Well, I'm sort of a lapsed Catholic. I grew up in my early years. I was actually taken through Catholic school, and but eventually ended up in public schools. Sort of thankfully. But and I did a film years ago with John, and it explored spiritual elements of religion, and it was a character that's surprisingly similar. So when to Gabe, his character in this film, and so when talking with the actor, we were almost jokingly saying this is a kind of a sequel, on some regards, and I don't know, John's just a brilliant actor, underutilized, flies under the radar, and thankful for me. I wanted to continue my cinematic journey with him, so to speak. So
Did you have him in mind when you were writing Thorns?
not necessarily. I don't know that I've ever, with the exception, when I talked to Doug Bradley, it became somewhat apparent to him, he felt that the character really, was almost molded around and for him. And so I had to admit, I had an idea that it would be great to work with Doug. But, when it came to John, no, I was very open-ended, and I normally don't write for anyone in, specifically. So,
Yeah. So you mentioned Doug Bradley. Getting him involved in the movie. Obviously, any horror fan wants to, to have Doug Bradley in your movie is amazing. Not
yeah.
just because his connection to Hellraiser, but he's a great actor and has so much presence when he's on screen.
Yeah, so the Hellraiser thing, is undeniable, and it's hard not to, I mean, when we're promoting this, we've sort of just, given up trying to not identify him, right? With Hellraiser. So now we say Hellraiser's Doug Bradley is in our movie, and that's really because he has such a loyal and passionate following. But I always say that it was hard to direct him in regard that once he starts acting on set, it's hard to find fault in. He's so well prepared, and he's one of the only actors I've ever worked with where he had every line of dialogue memorized, and he has these long monologues, these long soliloquies. And, so myself and the crew just sort of sat back, and we were being entertained as we would film. And quite often we end up using the first take, because we didn't need many takes with him on set. So that just speaks to his professionalism. And that old cliche saying, he could act the phone book, right?
Right.
And you'd be like, wow, that's really cool. So he's got that great cadence in his voice. So it was a pleasure to work with him.
Yeah, as soon as you see him, he's, like I said, he's got the voice is perfect. And he said it's kind of molded for him, but I think it definitely plays to his strength, his delivering the dialogue.
Yeah,
he's someone you just see, and like you could see people follow him.
Yeah, exactly. He would draw, there were certain lines, and he would say, this would be what Pinhead would say in Hellraiser 3, and so he would have all these references, but, it's very sincerely, he plays the role of this archbishop, and, we won't spoil it, but, is he good or is he bad? We don't know. And so I think he loved the challenge that presented to him,
Yeah.
So.
Along those lines, though, so if he does say like this is something that Pinhead would say, and that's cool, and there's some references to like a hell on earth and things like
Yeah.
that, but at the same time, is there any time you want to pull back? Like, well, we don't want too many references to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there is that fine line when you're trying to do a movie that homages your favorite era of cinema, but then you're like, come on, don't you want to do your own thing? And so, I always tried to say I was finding originality in the homage, but yeah, you do want, like the opening scene, there's something with an eye, and that's a reference to, zombies, right? Or zombie, from back in the 80s.
Right, whatever.
But yet it was redesigned in its own, its own location and so forth. So hopefully we don't cross the line into parody.
Yeah, plus I think like that stuff is fun if you are for like hardcore horror fans. Like I saw some stuff with the eyes and I thought of Event Horizon. And then, but you also don't want it to like someone has to have seen all these movies to enjoy
yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. No, you don't need to. And that's where we drew the line. There was also, I had a talk with our cinematographer and art directors, and they were wondering, was I going to put film grain, on it? And was I going to, make it look like right from the 80s? And I said, no, this has got to be contemporary. You want people to be able to, young kids to walk into this and not know all the references, but they're there. It's just like a good Bugs Bunny cartoon, right? The adults know.
Yeah, they play differently for a different audience.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and I also the film grains, if it's done well, it's cool. But so often you can like tell like someone just click the button and they put on like a pre-made a filter, and it kind of takes you out of it, I think.
Yeah, what is it, Skinamarink? Look, or whatnot. But although that worked for, so.
Yeah, honestly, that's another movie that did get a theatrical release, and I don't get the movie, but it did capture a lot of audiences. So.
Yeah, it's that whole like, whose perspective are you telling the story from? And you think that might be cool for a scene, but is it going to work for 89 minutes? And but it, what's interesting is I'm happy that did get out there, because it's avant-garde, right? It's a bit experimental, and more power to them, right?
Yeah, I would have never thought a movie like that would have got a theatrical release, or they're like one of our I'm not a fan of the movie, but one of our reviewers had it his second favorite movie of the year. He loves it. So
wow, yeah. Well, kudos to the filmmakers. So
And shout out to Jamie Hill, who is in Skinamarink, and she's a regular watcher. And the first time we didn't know she was in the movie, and she was in our chat room when we were doing the live show. And we were like, oh, we hated that movie. She's like, oh, I'm the mom in it. We're like, oh. But then she came on the show, and she's very cool.
That's great. Well, that shows the reach of your your show. So kudos.
And I think it's probably a good reaction to any movie to either have an extreme reaction, either very good or bad, as opposed to someone being like, nah, whatever.
Yeah, for sure. You're hitting buttons, and isn't that what I mean? There are people saying Oppenheimer, I don't want to turn this into any one big direction, but there were a lot of things about Oppenheimer that didn't work for me. But yet immediately when that film came out, a lot of people were really calling it like, this masterpiece, and I get that, but it didn't work as well for me, and So I guess that happens though, right?
Yeah. And even though it's a huge money movie stuff, that is it was an odd movie to be like a blockbuster, I think. Like I didn't expect that.
Yeah, yeah. You wonder how much Barbie played a role with that whole meshing, right? Of
Yeah. I'll be
Oppenheimer,
on that
Barbie.
we do Annabelle and I did Barbenheimer, and it was fun to see so many people coming out to the theater and dressed up and excited to see movies. So that was good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Imagine Theaters, in the Midwest here are putting Thorns in theaters, and we're talking with them now about a bloody Thorns drink.
Oh, I
You can
love
get,
that.
yeah. So and we'll shift at some point to some midnight screenings because again, we're gonna withhold any streaming.
Yeah.
So yeah, that ought to be fun.
Yeah, there's a couple theaters in I'm in Massachusetts. A couple theaters in Boston that do midnight movies.
Oh, nice.
Coolidge Corner Theaters, one of my favorite theaters. They do midnight movies every weekend on Saturday and Friday.
Yeah, it's a fun. I remember it when I was younger, just like I remember drive-ins, and that was a big part of my, kind of formative teenage years. And I would like to see that come back for the younger generation. Something like that with
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah. So, when you're actually going around to some of these theaters, what kind of theaters do you play at? Are they like art house theaters? Are they like an AMC or?
Yeah, well, right now, next Friday, or when people are hearing this, March 15th, we're expanding our release. We started in just the Detroit area and Kansas City, and we're now going out through a chain called Regal, the Regal Cinemas, and we're hitting like almost a dozen screens in Georgia. Down in the Atlanta area. We're flying all the way over to. We're going to be in Anchorage and Fairbanks, Alaska. We're going to be in Oregon, Indiana. And we're just getting this list, and so that's through Regal, and then the Imagine chain here in Michigan. Saginaw and Illinois and Indiana. In New York. So we call this phase 2. And then in April, we're going to broaden even more. And what's wonderful is our distributor has a lot of faith in the project. So we're just, we'll do what we have to try and bring it to audiences. So.
Yeah, I love that. Have you been going to a lot of the screenings yourself?
In the within our drive distance, and then of course
Alaska.
I won't be getting the RV and going there. But last year we spent we were overseas a lot because we played Sitges, that big horror festival in Spain, and then we did London Fright Fest and a few others, and we ended in New York at New York Horror Fest. So we traveled to all those, and after the year, I was like, I don't really want to do any more traveling for another year.
Yeah.
So,
what was had you done festival runs before with your previous films?
Yeah, not to the extent that we did this time, but I have put, I played, some, Cinequest, Hollywood Film Festival. I haven't done in Fantasia. I screened a movie there called The Dark Below, which was a thriller with no dialogue, and it's feature length. Yeah, but Fantasia loved that, and so yeah, I've been around, and done my fair share. So,
well, what are the benefits, in your opinion, of having your movie at a festival?
Wow. For us, like, I kind of know it's a great topical question you're asking. I think it's got to be the right festival, right? I mean, I think there's probably about 20 festivals that pertain to horror that are really of value, in my opinion, for the horror filmmaker when it comes to like distribution, interest, and then just audience building and in getting the critics there, to help promote it. So I think if you can lock into one of the right festivals, it can be a bit of a game changer for you. But there are thousands of festivals out there, and some of them are just kind of taking submission fees, and I don't know that they're doing a lot for the filmmakers, which is disheartening. So, but that's my opinion.
No, I mean, I agree. I don't like to bring the show about me, but so I had my first feature film a couple years ago, and we premiered at Fright Fest in London, and that was a
Nice.
great experience for me.
Yeah.
But the people I made the movie with had more more experience, so they kind of, like you're saying, they submitted to the ones that they knew like would help them for different reasons. Either
Yep.
people be there who would be interested, audience, whatever. But it is, I would suggest people find someone who has experience with it, so because it could be overwhelming because there are so many, and
Yeah.
it gets to a lot of money if you just start sending your movie everywhere.
Oh yeah. Well, and you got a good one there with London Fright Fest. That's a real good one. So yeah. I'm sure it was a good experience for you.
Yeah, it was a great experience. So then we had the U.S. premiere at Screamfest in L.A., which was
Nice. I have not done Screamfest yet, so maybe my next one.
Yeah. So how about coming up with the look for Dr. Malik? Well, not Dr. Malik, for the Necronaut.
Yeah, the monster. Yeah. Well, in the script, it was actually a malleable, formless entity in the early draft. And because, without spoilers, the whole idea of what's coming from within and all that, the original script was Dr. Malik it was almost a bit of a Body Snatchers where, it was this waxen, detailless void, and it became almost a replicant image. But I sat down with my effects guy Dan Phillips, and we started talking about and the subject turned to the religious content in Thorns. In the script there was some dialogue, and we zeroed in on that, and so we began kind of just sketching some things out, and it just evolved, and some people have seen the monster face, and they will equate the Thorns to different pop culture things, but it zeroed in on what the Thorns represent.
That's what I thought right away, Crown of Thorns.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a no-brainer. But deep down inside, I think there's actually a positive something deep within all the darkness and the horror. So
interesting. And you said you're like a lapsed Catholic. So, well, what does your family think? Do they see your movies, and what do they think of? What do they think of them?
Yeah, you'd probably. I don't know that I'd want to inject my, my relationship. My wife, we're interfaith. So I've married a Jewish woman, and here I'm Catholic. So we have this, intense clash. But everyone on her side of the aisle, loves the movies and goes. And then I've got a segment on my end that are supportive of the concept of filmmaking. But I'm not sure that they love horror films, that sort of thing. So I'm a bit of a loner when it comes to my genre of choice, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, at least they're supportive that you're making it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you did a previous movie with no dialogue, and then the Sister Agnes character is mute in the movie. Is there anything there? Is there something that interests you there about making something without dialogue or mute characters? Or
yeah, wow. I mean, you're zeroing in on something I've not ever analyzed. I suppose I could go back and look, and there might be she, not to turn it too in depth and change the tone of our podcast, but she's a bit of a representative, I think, of the church in general, and her silence and her, and to me, if you look at the story and then you kind of look at the Catholic Church today and some things, you might be able to put the pieces together on, what her character really represents and so forth, because we're living in such an interesting era. And although there's a growing community of almost fundamentalists and religious people, I think a lot of people are discarding religion and faith and so forth. So we live in a really interesting time.
Yeah, you could you could definitely say that, especially for people on social media, but yeah. So
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting that I liked when you first see her character. You don't know too much like how she got there, but there's enough stuff there that it leads up to your imagination, I think, to put together what she's been through to be in
Yeah.
the situation she's in.
Yeah, in the backstory, there's a convent, in the remote area, and she comes from there, and we actually built a very complex backstory with the actress Cassandra Schumer, who plays her so wonderfully, and she had such a challenge, to go through an entire feature film and play off another actor who does the talking, and she can't really, all her replies are physical, so it was a very challenging role for her, for sure.
Had you worked with her previously, Cassandra?
No, we actually had cast an actress I had worked for, or I had worked together with. I did a movie with the late David Carradine, and Richard Lynch and Dee Wallace. It was called The Rain. They ended up retitling it Dark Fields, and it aired on Showtime some years ago. But the lead actress in that film, I brought her back for this film, but there was COVID and some other things, and at the last minute, I was looking for a new nun. And thank God, we found Cassandra, because she was great.
Yeah, is that part of the reason for the small cast? Because you guys were filming like during COVID, or?
No. There were no roles that were cut.
No.
This was intentionally meant to be, kind of like a one room, a one act play, sort of, like Hitchcock did Rope, in that one location. I sometimes when I am writing as an independent filmmaker, I like to challenge myself, and we certainly gave ourselves a number of limitations, with this movie, that became challenges for us, So.
How about designing the room itself? Because it's like the hallway's really cool with all the pages of the Bible on the hallway, and the way it's lit at schools.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. The art direction comes from, some of it's built into the script, but Dan Dobrovich serves as our primary art director, and another gentleman by the name of Matthew Jarjosa. They work together to help bring the observatory to life. And, we worked off production design sketches and very minimal budget, and we had to do some downsizing for the ideas. Like, my initial envisioning was to see a big, telescope, right? A massive telescope that I would have thought could have really played into the story, art direction wise, but kind of had to erase that from the budget, so because we were building it all on sound stages, and we had limited space to work with. So
Okay. Well, but yeah, looks really good, I think. So,
cool.
how about you're credited with the music. Now, do you normally do the music for your films?
Well, that's a really interesting question because, I took a cue from, one of my favorite filmmakers is John Carpenter. And every film I've ever done, I've presented what I would call a temp score to composers. So, I always presented ideas. And over the years, these ideas just kept getting a little more developed and a little more developed. And my wife is the editor of this film, and so we had the luxury of we've got an editing suite where we live, and so while I'm watching the edit come together, I'm sitting there and I started to do the rough tracks. And the feedback I was getting was those aren't rough. That's a very well thought out and comprehensive piece of music. And so I'm like, oh. And so I did that again, and again. And next thing you know, and honestly, it was probably one of the most enjoyable parts of the filmmaking process.
Oh,
I
really?
had so much fun doing that. I'm never going to call myself a composer. I'm not schooled in music. I was working off samples and just learning things on the fly. And maybe I shouldn't say too much because I don't want to downplay it. But yeah, so it sort of evolved on its own, I think, doing the score. So
That's interesting. Now, has she always done the editing for your movies?
No. Yeah, she's mentally been on most of the sets and very critical, of things. And she actually is trained in editing and used to be here in the Detroit area. We have a commercial, editing. A lot of commercials are produced and edited here with the automotive industry. And she started out in that industry as an assistant editor. Never really, was in the feature arena, but always working on and helping me produce. And so it sort of evolved from there. And so we work well together. So
to go back to festivals in a way, so what's the differences between like watching your movie with a festival audience and since you've been watching it at the Regal audiences?
Yeah, well, that's a great question because at the festivals, there's a part in the movie where a character begins to sort of tear themselves apart, and something a metamorphosis begins to occur from within. And at the festival level, they're cheering and clapping. The gorier it is, the stronger the audience reaction in the festival circuit. So that was wonderful and very humorous. Not so much in the public, they're a bit more internal. They keep their feelings in. So we didn't have people talking back to the screen, but the festivals, boy, they're alive and vibrant and interactive, I think is a good word. So
that sounds like a fun time. And speaking of the people getting ripped apart and stuff, so who is in charge of the gore and the effects in the movie?
Yeah, well, his name is Dan Phillips, and this was a he also worked with a small core team, but he was responsible for lugging the guts onto set every day and handling. So it was comprehensive. The monster makeup is pretty, it's very good. And it took several hours every morning to put the actor Bo Schumacher, who plays wonderfully Dr. Malik, put him into this the Necronaut makeup. And you may not be able to tell this, but the actor who's beneath the monster makeup can't see it all. So he had to be led around set, and the makeup can become so suffocating, because it's adhesive and it's so closely adhered to his skin that he likened it to being he's an avid scuba diver, and he talked about the claustrophobic feeling that divers sometimes experience. And he was in this outfit and makeup, and there were times he was in that makeup for 6 to 8 hours, and we have fans on him, and he's he said there were a few times where there were like panic attacks from just being in the makeup. And so he was a trooper. I wish there was an award for monster perseverance. He would certainly deserve that for sure.
Well, that's another connection to Hellraiser, because like Butterball and Chatterer couldn't see it all in the first movie.
Yeah, for sure.
But now he said he was a scuba diver, so maybe he was used to that at some level. But had he had experience doing like heavy makeup before?
No, and so I think it was the training, in discipline he had from being a scuba diver that that helped him remain sane during the making of this film. And I still to this day remember, the days after filming, he had to come back in and get back in the makeup chair. And, I was kind of secretly saying prayers that, he'd be able to see it through. And he, again, he did it, and he did it amazingly well. So,
was it could he just take the mask off at times between sets, or usually not?
Yeah, it wasn't a pullover, so that was specifically when Dan and I met to talk about the makeup. We said we didn't want to resort to just having a pullover mask. So at no time in the movie, we probably could have, one or two of the days gotten away with long shots with a pullover and so forth. But no, we adhered, to detail, and it was up to a 4-hour process to get him into makeup every day.
Well, it looks great in the movie, and nothing against like the rubber monster stuff. Like, I like that, but it would have been a completely different kind of movie, I think, at that point.
Yeah, for sure. More of a almost
like a schlocky kind of comedy.
Yeah, you're right. We try to veer a little away from that. So
yeah. I think obviously I like the movie and everything, but part of getting into like at theaters and stuff, or getting people into the theater, is the poster art. Kind of like back when you used to be on Redbox. If it looked cool, you'd rent it. So, and the poster art looks great for Thorns. So who did the poster art? You will.
Yeah. Well, creepy. There are two posters. Well, there's a red and a blue, and that's I know him as Column, but online on social media, Creepy Duck Design.
Yeah, I know he's done posters for other guests we've had on the show. I actually was going to have him on the show at one point. And, he's real busy at the time making some posters. So.
Yep. So he did the traditional one you see, and I don't want to butcher his name, but Anthony, I believe it's Galatis, is an illustrator living in Greece, who actually is a big Doug Bradley Hellraiser fan, and he reached out to us, and he did another poster for us, and that's circulating now too, and it has a real cool retro vibe to it. And so yeah, we're blessed with good visual aids, for promoting, for sure.
Would you ever want to revisit this world, like a sequel, or?
Yeah, there is at the end of the film, we have one primary character, without doing spoilers, who's left. And I think that character's journey is yet to be explored. And, Doug Bradley is certainly, we worked really well together. And, we talked loosely between, filming and so forth. So if the right opportunity presents itself, we'd love to revisit the world. So.
And I've seen Doug, he's posting a lot about it. He's done interviews about it. He's was like on radio stuff, or TV or whatever. And so it seems like, he's really proud of the movie, which, I mean, he's proud of all his work, but it's good to see like, he's proud of Thorns.
Yeah. He, from the get-go, I didn't know if we would be able to attract him. And I knew his manager, Chris Rowe, and we'd worked together on another film. And so when I talked to Chris actually brought his name up and said, hey, I manage, this actor. And so, we got him the script, and Doug loved the script and connected with it. And, he always says that's his, his starting point. And, we went from there, and,
because you have to imagine, everyone's trying to get Doug Bradley, in their horror films. So,
oh, for sure, yeah, we were really fortunate, and he said my prehistory working with the manager really helped, with all that too. So
yeah. I also like that he has to be interested. It's not like, oh, I'm just gonna, not to name other names, but we've seen people pop up and stuff that you wonder like, why is he even in this? But you know what I mean? So, and it's good that I want to be interested in something if I'm going to do it, not just if they give me X amount of money.
Well, and the true test of that is what happens after filming, right? You could call them up for promotion and they're not picking up. And in this case, Doug came to New York, and we brought him into Detroit for the red carpet premiere. We went on radio stations, TV stations, and so he seemed to really believe in the project. And
honestly, as someone who's been doing the for like 20 years, I noticed that, and I think that's important because if like the quote unquote like the bigger names in a movie will go out and do promotion for it, to me it's usually, oh, they actually probably like this movie. And if you don't see them anywhere, it's probably like, they just did it for whatever,
Yeah, the paycheck, Yeah, they're all working actors, so you get all that. It's a business, show business, right?
It's especially important in modern day for them to go out and promote your movie, though.
You got to. I mean, his support has made a world of difference, in just audiences giving us a chance. And as there's so much content out there. And
so it's like easier to get something out in a way, but that makes it harder for people to actually come and see it since there's so much.
Well, there you go. Yeah. You can make a movie now with your phone, right? If you're smart enough and clever enough, but so can everyone else, right? So, go figure.
And just a little advice for anyone out there. I people ask me a lot if I know like not necessarily big names, but independent actresses who will really promote the movie if they're in it. And I'll give them names that I know, and people who aren't on social media. And I know it's not always fun to be on social media, but you kind of have to if you want to work in movies, especially like
for
on the
sure.
independent level.
I mean, you can have a great movie and no one can see it today, right? You can go on streaming platforms on Tuesday, and Thursday, you gotta type the title in because you can't find it anywhere. So it's a tough, because there's no more video stores to walk into or disc stores, and in the dynamics of theaters are changing. It's a weird world, for promoting a movie now.
Yeah. And I know and I'd like people to go see Thorns in theater because I like to support theaters in general, because to me, there's no better way to watch a movie than at the theater on the big screen. Not only the big screen, but the sound, and you can't escape unless I guess you're an ass and you start looking at your phone. And with especially like horror movies and comedies with fellow people who love the genre, and there's usually some interaction, and it's just a good experience.
Yeah, the communal, right, feeling. To this day, probably one of my favorite movie-going experiences was seeing John Carpenter's Halloween in a re-release in a movie theater as a kid. and everyone in that theater was jumping out of their seats. And it was, we began to notice it was the audience was as entertaining as the movie was, and there's nothing better than that.
Yeah, like I mentioned Oppenheimer. I actually like Oppenheimer, but you don't sit there and really interact with your audience when you're watching Oppenheimer.
No, and and yeah, let me be clear. I mean, I thought it was a very well made film, and I
Sure.
liked it.
Yeah, I get you.
When it comes to handing out the awards, I actually really liked a very quiet movie, The Holdovers.
I love The Holdovers, and just a weird little thing. Last winter, I was walking into Chinatown, Boston, and I looked over and I was like, I think that's the actor. I can't think of his name. The main
Paul
guy.
Giamatti.
And I was like, I think that's Paul Giamatti. And I looked over and there was like, hey, I was like, oh shit, I just walked into a set and they were filming him. And then when the movie came out, I was like, oh, I have to see this. And like, so there's a scene in there. They're walking down Chinatown. I'm not in it. I was looking to see if I was in the background, but I wasn't.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And they stopped at a bunch of little things I know right in that area of Boston. I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Wow.
But it's a great movie even besides that.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. That was one of my favorite movies last year.
Yeah, same here. So I'd give Paul the best actor, and I don't know that the directing can get any better than that.
Yeah,
so.
and that's a movie that really captures like the feel of a '70s movie, without being like, we're like a schlocky, like we're, it just feels like a movie from that era.
Well, and I love how clever it is when there are other characters other than him. That are actually very important to the story, and it's interesting how they're woven into the fabric of the storyline. It's really well done.
Yeah, I love that movie, and I don't just watch crazy horror movies. I like The Holdover. And but I was going with that. So you want people to see it at the theater. So first of all, where can they go to follow like Thorns and yourself and to see what theaters it's coming to?
Yeah. Well, we don't have a major page, social media page. I am on Facebook. If you look me up, Douglas Schulze, and I'm growing on TikTok. I think it's Douglas Schulze 1. So the movie right now, the next release, Regal Cinemas and Imagine Cinemas are going to expand the release Friday, March 16th. And if you're in Georgia, Oregon, Alaska, Indiana, and in many other states, you'll be able to find it. If for some reason it's not in your state, possibly April, we're going to do yet another expanse for it. So if you don't see it, ask your theater, but keep an eye out for it again at Regal Cinemas and or Imagine theaters throughout the U.S.
And not to get, because we want people to go to the theater, but do you plan on doing a physical release? You said,
Well, we will. Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable, right? Unfortunately, they're you need to try and make your money back and all that. So we'll probably find a streaming platform, to live on, and there are some deleted moments from the movie that could exist quite well, on a disc, sort of a director's cut thing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure eventually, maybe in 2025, all that'll happen.
Yeah, it's cool. So go see in the theater, and then in the future, get the Blu-ray or whatever. And it's kind of a perfect movie to do a limited edition VHS collectors, if that's something that could happen.
We're hoping, yeah, VHS would be wonderful for it. So hoping for that. So.
I don't even have a working VCR, but I'd buy it and put it up on the bookshelf or something.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, same here. Yeah, I just collect. It's like an old bookshelf. You're not going to read them all, but you collect them.
It looks cool. It's the main thing. Yeah.
It
could just be the box. It doesn't have to necessarily be the.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So it's been great. It's fun talking with you, and I look forward to seeing your other films, which I unfortunately have not seen. So I'm going to go check those out.
Okay. Well, yeah. these days, different streaming platforms have them, and the one I was just telling you about is a movie called The Dark Below. We will be doing a re-release, and that's the feature film that has no dialogue in it, and a crazy storyline. It's about a killer who's stalking a woman who's trapped beneath a frozen lake.
All right.
And so he's above the water, above the ice, and she's below the water. And so it brings up diving, and I've got some background in that. And so that played Fantasia back in 2015. Had a horrible release with our distributor that took a lot of money from us. That's a whole other episode. But we're going to do a re-release early next year, and so I'll send you a copy.
Okay, that'd be cool. We'll have you back on if you would like, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, thank you for reaching out, and really appreciate your time and value your insight. So,
yeah, thank you for doing this, and people
cool.
check out Thorns.
All right. Well, take care, Neil.
Thanks. You too.